Joining the conversation, we have editor-in-chief at The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg. And, Joe, we're chatting here about his recent visit, interview, work with President Trump, and it's fascinating.
Mr. Sunshine goes to the Oval Office. Our nickname, by the way, for the uninitiated, our long-running
name of my future autobiography.
Honestly, you are Mr. Sunshine today.
Mr. Sunshine.
He's smiling today a lot, Joe.
I'm smiling. I'm happy.
He's in good shape.
Of course,
great.
So Jeffrey, I'm curious about your takeaways, substantively, but also just sort of what you read, sitting across the table from President Trump. And, of course, I asked this question if people are going, what did he read? This is what you do and what reporters do and what we do when we're sitting across the table from any world leader or any politician or any diplomat. I'm curious, what were your major takeaways from your visit inside President Trump's Oval Office?
My very first observation, and this happened repeatedly in the interview, we walk in and the first thing he says, apart from like there's kind of like this knowing, like, oh my God, you're here, I'm here, how fun is this sort of thing. The first thing he said was, I bet Joe Biden would never do this. And then about 6 or 8 times during the interview, he refers to Joe Biden. Joe Biden doesn't do this. Joe Biden is dumb. Joe Biden was sleepy. Whatever. It's like it's truly odd. Like he's gone. It's like you're the president. It's just this crutch, and you see it in all his speeches. That was noticeable. You know, this was
can I ask you about that, Jeffrey? Though? Yeah. Can I ask you about that because one thing that we have said before about Donald Trump going all the way back to 2016 is, despite his antagonism with the press, he actually would get out in front of the press more in 2016 and again in 2024 than his opponents. And then today. So let me ask you, would Joe Biden have done that?
No.
Okay, right, exactly. And so the point is,
I can answer that. I don't have to answer that question as a theoretical. I can say Joe Biden didn't do that.
For people, they're going, what are you comparing him to Joe Biden? I'm just saying that is, if you talk to the press corps, if you talk to others, their biggest complaint through Joe Biden's 4 years in the White House is he did not grant the access, for instance, that Donald Trump granted to you, The Atlantic, to us, to the New York Times, to the Washington Post, to everybody.
No, and this is actually, it's an important point. Yes, Joe Biden didn't see us in that context at all, and that was too bad. I don't think the White House staff, much of the White House staff, and certainly the sort of MAGA faithful, really thought it was a super idea to bring us in. But he doesn't care. He's not scared, Donald Trump. He understands that it's all fake in a kind of way, that I'm going to curse them out on social, but we're just going to get together. I mean, first of all, here's the thing that people who study this know. He wants the approval of the mainstream media. When he doesn't get the approval of the mainstream media, he lashes out at the mainstream media. This is not a secret. You could watch this. So it's not surprising that we were in. It's not surprising that he turned on the full charm and the full charisma. It wasn't a confrontational. I asked, and my colleagues Ashley Parker and Michael Shearer asked hard questions, confrontational questions, and he handled them in a very low-key, non-defensive way. You could see it in the transcript that we posted. So it was fascinating. I mean, the thing that I'll take away from that more than anything was when I asked him, so I said to him, you're the most successful person in America. You've won. I'm even doing the hands. Like he does.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty good. It's not
the accordion. Yeah, I'm playing the accordion. The success accordion.
Yeah.
You're the most successful person in America. Like, you've won the presidency twice. And he goes, 3 times. And I'm like, and I said, that's my point. Like, you didn't win 3 times, but it's okay. Like, can we just go on from that now and not talk about vengeance and revenge and retribution? And he's like,
and lies.
Well, this is what he said. He said, look, there's two kinds of people here. You know, there's ones who think we should just go forward and do policy or whatever. And believe it or not, I'm in that category. And I said, I don't really believe it. And then he said, and there's a bunch of people here in the White House, though, who think that we can't let this kind of campaign against me go unanswered. So he's like pinning all of the retribution activities, which are manifold, on his staff. I thought that was a kind of an odd situation. And I just felt like it was like this weird deflection. It's like, we know that you're the retribution president, and the reason we know that is because you said you were going to be the retribution president.
Retribution, right.
Yeah.
So there's so much in here. We'll talk about tariffs. We can talk about Ukraine, talk about immigration. But I am curious about what you said at the top, which there was a knowing look from the president. Isn't this funny to two of us here? Yeah. What did he say about what's become known as Signalgate, where you were invited famously into that Signal chat where there were attack plans, classified attack plans placed in there? What did he say about that?
Yeah, I mean, he had sort of ultimately when we got him to actually address the substance of the issue, he had kind of almost like a Catskills routine about, I said, what's the lesson? Like, what's the operational security lesson of Signalgate? And he goes, maybe don't use Signal. You know, like kind of like pretty simple. But what was interesting was his notion of Signalgate is different. The importance of it is different to him than it is to, let's say, me or us. He thought that we were successful with Signalgate, not because we exposed pretty serious national security lapse on the part of his officials, but because we got a lot of attention. You know, and attention is the metric. So he was very much focused on, well, you got a lot of attention for that, so therefore you succeeded, and therefore I have to contend with this in some way because, you know, Signalgate dominated the news cycle for 12 hours or 24 hours or something like that. But he doesn't take it seriously. I got the sense, for what it's worth, I got the sense that his support for Pete Hegseth is not a forever kind of support. You know, he was like, he's going to work it out. It's going to be fine. I had a talk with him. It was a positive talk. He was very much in rhetorical control when he was talking about Pete Hegseth in a way that he was like reminding himself, don't throw the guy under the bus until I have to throw the guy under the bus. Right. But, you know, if you're Pete Hegseth, you're sitting there going, I don't know, this guy got it. He has a black mark on him, you know, right now. He's got he's like two strikes or something like that.
Yeah, you know, Jeffrey, that's what's so fascinating about these interviews. And again, for people saying, well, why do reporters go in and talk to Donald Trump? The question answers itself. But you read between the lines. You read him. You kind of read the people in the room and see how they're responding. And I thought one of the real tells in here are just what you're keying in on, and something that we noticed when we sat with him. The fact he did not appreciate being blindsided during the transition about Pete Hegseth's problems that he wasn't told about. And then in your interview, the fact that it was not a wholehearted, you know, like you said, he was rhetorically in control, but it was not a wholehearted endorsement of Pete Hegseth. He said, I think he's going to get it together. I had a talk with him, a positive talk, but I had a talk with him. You certainly don't have to read through that too much to draw the conclusion that you drew, Jeff.
The important word in that quote was the but. Yeah. I had a positive talk, but I had a talk. But the but means that it wasn't that positive. It was like, what are you...
But there's still a problem.
What are you doing over there? And I think, like, in a more serious vein, inside the White House, people are coming to him and saying Pete Hegseth does not have control over the world's largest organization. You know, or second largest organization after the Chinese People's Army. You know, like Pete Hegseth is not in control of this situation. And, you know, there's another thing he said. He started talking about, I hire so many people in this office. We hire 10,000 people. Sometimes we make mistakes. Maybe I'm over-interpreting that, but it was kind of like, well, when somebody has to leave, it's because we have too many people to hire. I mean, it is true that they hire 10,000 people in the executive office of the president. It's also true that the Secretary of Defense is about the second or third most important one, arguably maybe the most important one. So you want to get that one right. But yeah, there was definitely a kind of a feeling of like, yeah, I like Pete, but
a little separation.
Yeah.
So as we heard repeatedly in the cabinet meeting yesterday, it's very active first 100 days for this president. But it seems like the defining storyline in many ways is the tariffs and the economy. That's what they're most nervous about in the White House. We're curious. Tell us what, in your interview with him, talk to us about how he defended or rationalized or explained the tariffs.
Yeah, so it's good to, and I hadn't seen him in a long time. It's very good to have direct exposure to him in order to understand what truly moves him and what what truly grips him. And there's nothing except for the immigration issues, like get them out, whoever them is. There's nothing that he more sincerely holds on to than the idea that tariffs are the answer to the central dilemma of his life and what he thinks of as the central dilemma of American life, that we're being ripped off. Right. And so, we've all talked to economists to explain that it's not a ripoff when you buy a shirt that's made in Vietnam and you give Vietnam money, they get money, you get a shirt, you don't feel ripped off. But in Donald Trump's universe, if there's an imbalance, it means that somehow we're being ripped off. He is committed to this. He did not say, he was asked explicitly by Michael Shearer, is there a point at which the stock market and the bond market tell you enough and that you pull back? And he said, there's no Trump put. There's no red line past which I'm not willing to go. That could be just, a negotiating ploy. But he really believes that tariffs will be our salvation, and he's committed. And we've heard him. He says, well, maybe this quarter will be bad. Maybe next quarter will be bad. It's amazing that you really don't hear presidents that committed to causing a recession in order to achieve an ideological goal. It's sort of impressive in the sense that a man who we think doesn't really believe in anything really does believe in this as a panacea. Impressive in kind of almost a perverse way when you look at your 401k or the stock market. But he really is gripped by the idea that this is the salvation of the United States, and he doesn't really care what experts say.